Dark. That is simply the best word to describe all of this. Because even if the sun won't sink and the light stays, there's still the ever-lurking shadow. And of course, between all stars, there's simply only dark. But I know you want to rather hear about the stars, right? How the sky seems forever dark and forever long and filled with small dots. You want to hear how it feels to venture among them and break the everlasting silence. I had never taken the biggest interest in becoming an astronaut, but once you have come to visit the stars, there will always be this longing for them. I still feel it today, after so many years, every single night. I know you want to hear about the stars, but I know a story way more interesting. While stars are so far and so complex, for us not more than a little sparkle in the middle of the ocean, or like fish vanishing in waves like blinking stars. My story is about a special asteroid. Back then I was young and had only flown a few planes for the Air Force, high-speed planes. I loved being a pilot, being so close to the sky, touching the edge of the clouds. I felt like I was on top of the world. Soon enough, I and a few others were called in from duty, asked if we were ready to take a high risk. Some had just built a house, started a family. They didn't want to take any risk. But me, I felt immortal. I could touch the clouds. No risk could ever stop me. As you know, I was alone. My parents died young. I had no siblings, no wife. It was only me and the high winds. Soon we got tested. Our mental and physical health, our skills and intelligence. We knew we would fly into space, but not why. Still, I kept my excitement, while more and more pilots were sorted out. Still, I kept my silence, while more and more pilots were sorted out. It's a difficult mission. You will have to land on a dwarf planet smaller than our moon. We need samples. It was not much more that was needed to convince me. Being so close to the stars, who doesn't dream of this? Years of training, years of suffering, years of making great friends, some friends that wouldn't come back to Earth. Until the day finally came. The rocket bigger than ever imagined, the buzzing atmosphere of engineers and technicians that were now responsible for our lives. The vibration of the start was shaking my bones. My body pressed into the seat as I felt unable to move my limbs. I knew this force from the training, but nothing could have ever prepared me for this feeling. So heavy, so small, so loud, and so alive. I never thought was possible to feel. As the pilot, I felt fearful, carrying the burden of responsibility, but I acted proud. I was the youngest, I was the pilot, I proved myself for this mission. We all proved ourselves in the training, however, I only had 2 assistants and no other pilots as we landed. On Ceres, the nearest dwarf planet from Earth, right in the asteroid belt of our solar system, hard to believe that not that long ago we couldn't travel further than the moon, and now we almost missed the view on our Earth as we left the orbit. Now, of course, I was relaxed and landed our spaceship in a perfect smooth manner. And that is true if we ignore the heavy shaking of the ship, the hour-long adjustments, and the sweat-drained clothing I had to wash right after. But we survived, and in front of us was the view no human had ever seen before. Our clouds were asteroids, our days were sprinkled with stars. Thinking back, I still feel the air caged in my lungs, and my heart feeling heavy while my body felt weightless. Further from Earth than anyone before, and still the same stars. No atmosphere, no chance to survive in the most beautiful sky I would ever see. The engine was off for the first time. The only thing we heard was our own breathing. All 3 of us held on to the wall, just hovering, trying to understand, to realize where we were. Again, no training could have really created this absolute emptiness. the loneliness so much heavier than on Earth. The days went by as we all went to do our jobs. I had to learn a lot about health, nutrition, physics, electronics, and astrology, even some math. All the things I never wanted to hear about after school, but if it meant I would go to space, I would redo my whole school life. We did have a mission, taking samples of the stone on the planet, measuring its gravity, and looking for ice that could indicate microscopic life away from Earth. We were looking for stones and potential aliens. That might sound cool, but as someone as minimal interested in science as me, it's just looking at stones. Hundreds and hundreds of rocks. Well, we also stayed on a big rock. To be fair, a really big rock, but still a rock. But one of us had another mission, a little secret that led to the fatal day. I can't exactly remember which day it was, but I am pretty sure it was Monday. Only on Mondays we would share one of the cereal packages we had for breakfast. Mondays were the best. Just one thing disturbed my favorite meal. Carter, our biologist or geologist, I don't even remember, he was a scientist. This morning he felt sick. His breakfast did not rest long in his stomach before it was hovering in front of him in a little ball. We all had thrown up at some point in the training, but Carter was the first to feel sick up here. That day we hardly saw him, only heard when he got sick or his snoring when he fell asleep. I felt sorry for him. We didn't have much time left of our mission, and he seemed so excited to go out to look at some souls at the Okado crater. The day went by and it was particularly boring. Carter had a lot more excitement for this research than Scott. Scott was rather quiet. He was the most experienced of us and had already been to space before. I'm not sure what kind of scientist he was. To me, he seemed just too serious and boring. He did his test, he trained, like all of us. We also talked as we ate together, but I just didn't feel as close to him as I felt to Carter. Probably the age gap I thought back then. The day dawned as for the first time our navigation warned of abnormalities. I called Scott, showing him the closing in object on our right. We have to go, was the only thing he said before I was left in confusion. Go out? I never planned to leave our ship. I am just a pilot. I heard Scott talking to Carter, Carter's excitement in his sick, broken voice. Yes, I will keep observing. Carter pulled himself into the cockpit and smiled at me with his pale lips. Your very first outside mission, friend. How could he be sick and still so positive? Remembering our training, my movements felt automated, while my thoughts kept running. I would be out there at minus 70 degrees Celsius, only protected by this suit. We didn't know what asteroid was closing in, how that was even possible, nor did we check how big it was. We simply trusted Scott in his judgment. He was the oldest, the most experienced. He knew what he was doing. My thoughts were everywhere. I could hardly focus. Now I was thankful for the endless, tiring training for so many months. Only when my feet touched the ground and I felt the slightest pull of gravity on my body, my thoughts stopped. The static of our radio was the only thing filling the void. Can you hear me? Carter's voice almost startled me as it broke the static. Yes, was all I managed to say. The static returned as a soundtrack for the stars. Endless craters blasted the surface of Ceres. So much bigger here than from the windows or my computer screen. So near, but still hardly to believe. The brim of the planet, grey in front of the darkest black I had ever seen. Like a black screen sprinkled with white paint. The sun so far away, no warmth left, only a bigger light spot on the galaxy's black canvas. There, now concentrate on me. Scott's voice broke the static as an object rose from the horizon. slowly, like the sunrise of a dead star. A grey asteroid, round, almost smooth, started to block the sun. A round asteroid in such a small size, moving in irregular patterns. I did not understand enough about astrophysics to realize what exactly this meant, but enough to know that this was not usual. Follow my every step. Be careful. Scott slowly walked along our spaceship. I made sure to stay close to him, my eyes glued to the asteroid. What is it? I finally managed to ask. I don't know. I never saw something like this before. I froze. I felt my body starting to shake. Scott didn't know? We were about to explore a rock we didn't even know? My breathing hitched. I could hear my heartbeat. Scott, what do we do? Stay, it's getting closer. He was right. The asteroid had risen above the horizon and was coming our direction. Was it orbiting Ceres? Did we just not notice it before? Is it Ceres' moon? My question was not even addressed by Scott. A simple proof to me that it must have been a stupid question. Scott, it will hit our station any minute. Like a balloon causing more fear than fun, it was now almost above us, threatening to hit the top of our antennas. It will stop any second. How do you... I forgot the end as the asteroid stopped above us. It seemed so close, so big. Only small craters were visible, like little pores on a perfectly round face. This is it. This is what we searched for. With these words, Scott started to get ready. He was about to set off. Scott, what do you mean? What is this? What are we looking for? I couldn't understand. I couldn't focus. All previous probes we had sent were destroyed. All of them. Had sent one last image of a round, close asteroid, just like this one. Peter, are you really this stupid? No asteroid this small is round and nothing in space can move like this. It's alive. Whatever it is, it sabotaged all our previous missions and we are here to find out what it is. But our rock mission, the eye is the soul. Did you really believe they trained us just to look at some salt? You're so naive. They knew the danger. They didn't want to risk the life of their best astronauts. I wanted this mission. I wanted to know what killed all my probes. Scott set off. He pushed off the station and drifted right towards the asteroid. My head felt empty. I couldn't understand. Did Carter know? Peter, come here. You need to see this. Scott had reached the asteroid. His hand was wandering across the surface, unsure of my action but driven by curiosity and Scott's authority. I pushed off. For a few endless moments I felt helpless in this void as I slowly docked onto the asteroid. Not far from Scott, I felt unable to breathe. In the little craters across the deep grey surface was something moving. Every hole seemed to glow in a light blue from deep down. I held both my hands on the rock, careful not to cover any holes. I knew I couldn't fall anywhere, but the hard ground under my palms made me feel safe. I looked in Scott's direction. He had a small metal tube or a stick in his hand. Scott, what is this? What are you doing? Over the curve of the asteroid, I couldn't see his hands, only when he raised them off. Peter, be careful, these things are evil. I'm trying to get one of them out of there, somehow. His voice sounded strained as I only saw the metal stick rising and stabbing down beside his head. How did I not notice the stick before? My eyes wandered back to my own hands. I almost pushed myself off as the little blue shimmering movement startled me. And as if they felt my surprise, they also backed away from my hands. Like little leaves or grass or maybe tongues had they risen out of the holes, carefully reaching for my fingers. They tried again now, my hands resting between the holes as all around little leaves like straws reached for my fingers. They really were slow, almost careful, not to scare me again. As the first touched my fingers, I didn't feel fear. Even through the thick gloves of my suit, I could feel their warmth, almost like they wanted to calm me down. They didn't have the blue glowing I saw before, it was more of a purple color. My heartbeat slowed as my breathing normalized. Now I could see the blue glowing from one of the holes, like a flower with petals all over the top, rose a long strand along my arm. It made me smile, it looked so pretty. I still felt warm from the little leaves on my hand. Slowly and careful started the flower to wrap around my arm. As it tightened a bit, I felt safe as I was as a child in the arms of my mom. Tears streamed over my smile as my heart was wrapped in warmth. More and more flowers climbed up my arm, not further than my shoulder.
Peter, they're trying to break into my suit. Peter, back off. Fuck, Peter, get...
Scott's voice was carried by panic, but I hardly understood his words.
Peter, push off!
Was the last thing I heard from Scott as I felt how I was dragged away from the asteroid. The warmth still streaming through my body. I miss my mom so much. It was the only thought I could hold as my smile stayed. I was dragged by my arm. I didn't even look back as I felt a heavy wave that pushed the rest of my body and made me spin. I couldn't get my thoughts together, and before my concentration could return, I felt our station under my left hand. The warm feeling slowly left my right. I looked up just as the flowers untangled around my arm. I waved. They slowly vanished inside their holes. Only a small round asteroid was left, just a bit bigger than my head. Scott, where are you? Only the static greeted my words. I looked up. The endless sky, now not only sprinkled by stars, but also little pieces of rock. Scott had blown up the asteroid. It was in pieces, and he was too. Not really in pieces, but one of the rocks had cut off his oxygen support, and no words over the radio seemed to reach him. I pulled him back with the steel line attached to our suits. Carter said we had to leave the little alien plants outside until we found the airtight box for them. We both didn't speak much as we pulled Scott's body inside the ship and packed him up. The usual sparkle had left Carter's eyes. We ended the mission 2 days later, and I wrote a long report of what had happened. Carter did not speak about anything but his rocks and salt. After I handed in my report, we both had to sign a promise to never speak of this to anyone, not even each other. Our friendship ended with a simple handshake as our ways parted. Yes, so that was how the story ended. After telling us all this, Grandpa always looked sad. He loved the story, he really did. You must have heard that story very often if you can retell it so detailed. Yeah, every year on his birthday. Once I asked him why he told me it if he wasn't allowed to tell anyone. And he simply said, "I know you can keep a secret." I smiled, remembering my grandpa. Before his death, he had told so many unbelievable stories. But the one about the asteroids was his favorite. Of course, I knew it was just a story, but it filled me with childlike wonder. I pulled out my grandpa's astronaut portrait, his proudest possession. I promised my mom to make a digital copy so it wouldn't get lost as we moved. As I pulled off the back of the frame, some old notes and papers fell out, an envelope, some photos of my grandpa in space. But between the papers I felt a rubbery string, like a rubber band but more stable. At the end there were little petals like those of a flower, but in a glowing blue I never saw before. As I touched it I felt warm, as tears poured into my eyes, and I felt safe. As safe as I never felt before.